ladies and gentlemen. Good night. How are you? This is part three. Hello, this is part three to Brother Reggie's paper reading. So I'm going to go right into it right now and go right through it, okay? So this is where we left off right here. As in the case of 10 Tenet to you, where the coffin text using sacred cattle was talking about the sacred followers of Hathor. Here, in the case of Miriam Lichcom, is also talking about sacred cattle. In this case, black cattle. We can see when we look at the pyramid text statement, section 1998b, Aha, Ket, Pa, Fa, En. I'm not going to attempt to read the transliteration. We can see that the Kometiyu can only mean these sacred black cattle, and the sacred black cattle are actually people who are followers of the black bull Hep Apis. Give me 1 second there. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. All right. Followers of the black bull Hep Apis. Traditional Egyptologists can argue that Kemetu does not mean all black Egyptians and that this is a special case for adherents of Hep or other black bull deities. However, there can be no argument that they are African people of ancient Kemet civilization and there was no syncretism with African gods. Only publications such as Africology, the Journal of Pan African Studies, built by the Ma'ah, I'm sorry, I don't want to butcher that, can be continued by the Kemetu. Was Kemet directly applied to the people of Kemet civilization? The answer is absolutely yes. However, I want to show another case where color was applied to cold animals to do this. The Chem glyph is important to review to make sure that in the context of Kemet, with this case sacred black cattle, that it does not mean people or at least dark. The Kemet glyph is KM16. The glyph itself designates the color black, but is listed under the Gardner category of reptiles. The glyph is argued to be a burning piece of wood or crocodile skin or paw. So, Kem, in a concise dictionary of Middle Egyptian, this is the handwritten part here that says black. This is Faulkner's handwritten dictionary here. And then Kem in the Thesaurus Lingua Egypti. See here how this one has a color determinative here, and this one does not have a color determinative here. Right. So as we go on, the following figure is that of Sepen Wapet II performing the rite of driving the four calves, where you have the upper register, eastern half of the southern wall courtyard funerary chamber of the dappled speckled bull wedge, that would be this one here. The red bull desheret, which is this one here. Okay, we see the same chem glyph here that we just saw above in the TLA. At times, it could mean black, dark, and gray. Here, there is syncretism between the cattle, calves, and colors. A quick search of any Egyptian dictionary can confirm this, and an argument that chem does not designate a color is useless. The calves are identified by color, so an argument that they are not becomes futile. The ancient people of the entire Nile River exercise a culture based on cattle worship. Ancient Egypt is the daughter and great and granddaughter of much more ancient African civilizations which were dependent on cattle. The ancient Kemet civilization elevated the cattle to divine. The color of the cattle was an important factor in the religion and culture of ancient African people, and the Kem black color was paramount in distinguishing sacred cattle. Said before, in other words, arguments have been made since the rise of Europe as they encountered ancient Kemet civilization about who these people were. The ancient Kemet civilization literature, scores of names with the Kem glyph embedded within them. The question is, does Kem as a color apply to people? Brave Europeans have rendered these names meaning nothing else but the black. Edward Brovarsky, chapter False Doors and History, the Sixth Dynasty, 1 gives us an illustration of a primary. The figures below are of Pepi Hennekem. The grapheme chem is present in the figure. So let's go down here and take a look. As a reference on this, I leave this book, Encyclopedia of Ancient Egypt, New York, Facts on File. It contains at least a dozen of personal names with Kem in them. Kakimu, Kem Waweb, Keminbu, so Bekem, Seth, the first through third, Takem, Dejert, Kemu Tef, Kem and Web, Kemsit, Neb Kemi, Nisank, Kemi Pep Kem, Nisank. Right, so as you look in here, Pepi Kem and several more, the names are largely connected to the belief system, but also connected to the colors. So as you look in here, you'll see all these different names here. As we look here, we see an illustration here as well. This is the Kemble. Right. Now I think this would be. I don't want to attempt to read that because I'm not very good at hieroglyphics, so I'm not going to make an attempt to read that to mess up this reading. Here, the sacred black cattle is equivalent to a sacred black man. In the context of this paper, this man is the I'm not going to make an attempt to read the transliteration and mess up the paper. And all men and women before current and yet to be born who are in this tradition. The first Kemet king connection to cattle. King Namer, or in parentheses here, Narmer, is credited with unifying ancient Egypt and beginning what is known as dynastic Egypt in the period of 3100 BCE through a series of artifacts. The Narmer palette and the Narmer mace had helped us to see the syncretism of this important king and his connection to cattle at the early stages of this civilization. Further, right, the figure Narmer palette 52. Labeled top of the Narmer palette, we see a horn that is an ancient female cow deity. This may be Bat or Hawet. This figure of the female cow exists in the same place on both sides of the palette. The worship of the cow predates dynastic Kemet civilization. The following article entitled Tracing the Origins of Ancient Egypt Cattle Cult, the author states that the following studies of ancient Egyptian religion have examined texts for evidence of cattle worship, but the picture given by the text is incomplete. Mortuary patterns, cere- ceremonial buildings, grave goods, ceramics, and other remains also contain evidence of cattle worship and underlie its importance in early Egypt. The recently discovered cattle tumuli, tumuli at Napta Playa in the western desert are identified here as a potential source of evidence on the origins of cattle worship in the ancient Egyptian belief system. For more information on cattle worship at Napta Playa can be found in Hassan F. 1988, The Pre-Dynastic of Egypt Journal of World Prehistory, 135 to 175, Bamugal, Bam, Boom Gartel E. 1960, The Culture of Prehistoric Egypt, Volume 2, London, Oxford University Press, page 90, Fisher H.G., 1962, The Cult and Nome of the Goddess Bat Journal of American Research Center in Egypt, Volume 1, pages 7 to 18. In the normal palette, the king is represented as a bull. We see this this directly in the figure labeled bottom. Here the king as bull is seen conquering a city. In the figure, the king is the bull, and the bull is the king. There is no separation in the minds of the first dynastic people of Kemet. The next figure we will see the king Narmer with 4 cows on his kilt. The, this cements that the king himself is connected to a cattle culture. Significant to this figure is the tail. Significant to this figure is the tail. Scholar Mark LeBlanc, in an important article entitled "The Bull's Tail as a Zoomorphic Symbol of Royal Power at the said festival," the author said the following: although, and I quote, although there are several possible correct interpretations of the word said in the term heb said, according to one convincing explanation, the word said is etymologically linked to an Egyptian word meaning tail. Word about 4, 363, 4, 364, 2. The tail shape determinative Gardner sign F33 that appears in the standard orthographic writings of said tail is very similar to the narrow triangle shaped determinative for the word said in the term heb said. In this etymological interpretation, if this etymological interpretation of said is correct, it seems likely the word said in the term heb said probably refers to a ceremonial animal's tail that is attached to the back of the Egyptian ruler's waist during the performance of several notable rituals at the ceremony of the Set Festival 33. In a representation of the Set Festival from the Proto Dynastic period onwards, the Egyptian to sacred shrines, the raising of the jet pillar, and the king's presentation of offerings to deities first attested with certainty as a component or royal garb in the depiction of the said festival on the scorpion mace head. The ceremonial tail that often hangs from the back of the king's waist is in, is important ritual scenes. In important ritual scenes is most likely a wild bull's tail during the proto-dynastic period and early dynastic period. The bull's tail most often appears as a component of the Egyptian ruler's outfit during the performance of vigorous ritual activities such as the groundbreaking ritual, the hippopotamus hunt, the Koenig Slav, and its variant, the royal flowing run, the royal smiting ritual, the royal inspection of a defeated enemy combatant ruler, often wears a ceremonial tail while performing rituals requiring a heightened level of physical exertion. For example, during the temple foundation rites, the Koenig Slav, the king's visit on the battlefield, and the ritual shooting of arrows. In the context of these early Egyptian royal scenes, the ceremonial bull's tail symbolically imbues the Egyptian ruler with the potency and strength of an aggressive wild bull. In several early Egyptian royal scenes, the Egyptian ruler completely transforms into a bull by performing physically strenuous rituals such as the trampling of enemies and the Koenig The author's comments are extremely useful in that it gives a description of the artifacts in the context of the ritual mind of the king of Kemet in relationship to cold animals. This helps us with supporting the syncretism in the already mentioned text of a later king Unas, where he says that he is the black ram, one of the black sheep already mentioned. So, since this is page 15, I think I'm going to stop here for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. God bless and good night. Let me end the stream.